Welcome to the United We Scan podcast, the podcast by rural carriers for rural carriers. The views expressed in this podcast are of the presenters and the presenters only and do not represent the views, opinions, or strategies of the United States Postal Service or the National Rural Letter Carriers Association. We ask that you please consult your assigned union representative for guidance in your local area. Please like this podcast, share with your fellow rural carriers, and subscribe to be notified each time a new episode is uploaded. Please leave a comment or question for us below. Thank you. Now, here are the hosts of the United We Scan podcast.
Welcome back, everybody. Episode 124, Hot Off the Press. Now, this is a double entendre of a title because not only do we have something literally fresh, hot off the press as of this past Monday, but it's also going to be extremely hot out there. But we're going to start off with the hot off the press, the biggest topic everybody's talking about, the biggest problem in this draft, which was the passing of this tentative agreement. I'm not saying passing the tentative agreement was the worst thing to ever happen to this draft. There's been worse things that have happened. But we're talking about the extreme apathy in the number of votes. We had over 6,000 less votes in this tentative agreement election than the past 3 tentative agreement elections that we've had. Now, the biggest thing I want to point out is the very words that were said both by our president and our current acting postmaster general, Doug Tolino. The agreement aligns with the Postal Service mission to provide reliable, value-driven mail and package delivery service to all Americans in fulfillment of the universal service obligation. It is fair to our employees and serves the best interest of our customers. I don't know about you, but hearing matching phrases in just that statement from Acting Postmaster General Doug Tolino to what our current president, Don Maston, has said, has lit a fire underneath me a little bit even more than him saying that we've had it too good for too long, or that rural carriers are finally getting paid what they deserve for their valuations when 66% of our fellow brothers and sisters lost money on the very first implementation of REC. The interesting thing is 66% seems to be President Maston's theme. 66% of carriers lost wages at the implementation of REC. 66% of carriers who were adjusted underneath the MOU had to pay back the Postal Service. And 66% of carriers voted yes on this tentative agreement. I'm seeing a pattern here. How about you guys? We'll start with Josh. Let Bill stew a minute because I know he wants to go off.
I want to be measured in my response.
Get a yardstick.
Shut up. I'm not angry. I'm disappointed. I am disappointed at the, let's see, I've got the numbers here. Somebody do the math right quick in chat. Take 14,650 away from 91,369. Somebody throw it up in chat or I'll do it right quick. Until I get that total. What the hell, people? Why? Now, I understand that some of the ballots could not be delivered due to abnormalities or irregularities in people's mailing addresses. But why did you not vote? Give me a good reason. Oh, I'm sorry. In my view, and I want to go on the record as saying this, there is no good reason to not vote in my book. If you
Yep.
value your working conditions, if you want to have your opinion heard, you have to vote. And if you didn't vote in my book, you have no right to bitch about the terms. Oh, by the way, I did the math. 76,719 people they did not receive ballots back from. Now, like I said, I don't know how many of those were from people not getting their ballot or they were returned due to abnormalities with the return address. But I'm mad.
How about 16% of the voting craft voted?
I thought that 25% returns in a national election was bad. Folks, we're in deep shit. We've got to light a fire. I don't care if you vote for or against, just freaking vote.
I'll give you another number, Josh. In 2022, our last tentative agreement vote, we had a return rate of 23.34%.
Okay. Why the drop?
Apathy.
Apathy is the cancer of democracy, or in this case, our association. And there is but one cure for this cancer, and that is getting people to vote. Get people informed that there is a vote coming and have people take it upon themselves to be educated so that they can make a good decision. I'm surprised at how contained I am tonight. Let's not go over. Well, okay, screw it. My state of North Carolina had less than 10% return margin for our delegate ballots for national convention. That's terrible. Why? James, Bill, anybody?
Bill's turn.
All right. First, you need to correct yourself, James. According to the national website, 67% of the people voted for the contract, not 66. I don't appreciate you using 66 as a sign of the devil and trying to align it with our national officers in any fashion.
It was 33.333
Damn.
and 66.6666.
It said 67%. Let's go with
Yeah, they
black.
rounded up.
Yeah,
They
let's go
rounded up.
black and white, just like the contract, okay? No interpretation here.
67% there, 67% lost on Rex, and 67% of people got their had to pay the postal service back when their routes were adjusted.
I'm flabbergasted also, but I expected this type of return. Okay, I can't say that I wasn't anticipating it because of and as we've called it over the years, and I mean years, the apathy that has infected this craft, and it's infected it because the doctor who can heal the situation, aka the national board, has done nothing to out why there is such apathy in the craft. Not since Don turned around at SWAC last year and said, "Oh, they're a bunch of freeloaders and scabs. Oh, you had it too good for too long. You're working under your valuation." You know, that's one of the things about rural carriers. We're efficient. We don't sit there and play with ourselves. We get the mail out and get it done. If we're paid evaluated and we're efficient, why should we be penalized by you changing the standards again and again and again? You know, if the patient is dying, okay, and the craft is dying, doesn't somebody have to find out where the infection's coming from? Where's the sepsis that is, killing the body? To turn around, and we had our state convention this past week, and out of possibly 400 plus delegates, 111 showed up. 25%. I guess that's pretty good for some states. I don't know, but to me it's sad when we offered to pay your hotel bill in full for the rooms and put $200 spending money in your pocket. I got one taker besides myself. And since the gentleman didn't get there on time in regards to getting the discounted room rate, it cost us an extra $200 as a local. I don't care. This guy came back enthused about going to his first state convention in 23 years. Now he's excited about participating in the system. And he saw all the little innuendo and the politicking and everything else. But he's enthused again to go to the next state convention. If you don't get involved, you really don't have a right to complain. Oh, I have a right to complain. Yeah, you got free speech. But free speech doesn't extend towards the union because your voice is mute if you're not in the union. I turned the possibility of running for president for our state board, was asked by numerous people, including the state president, because I thought I had a better chance of helping people and affecting change through the podcast. Due to the fact that people IM me, call me, text message me, and everything else, which as part of our state board, I would not be allowed to do. Then people asked me to run for vice president because the two candidates they had running for that office were, for lack of a better term, less than culpable in regards to performing the duties required of the office. Again, I turned it down. I have a larger voice on this podcast, which is more important to me than fulfilling a state office position. But the fact of the matter is, apathy is killing us. And nobody at the national level is recognizing that the patient is dying. Especially when you raise your damn dues rates again, higher than our damn salaries that were raised in percentage-wise. At times, I sit there and shake my head. No wonder people don't want to be involved. No wonder people don't want to be in the union. Look at the hell what's going on. And then to find out, here's a statistic. Patrick Pitts was our national board member that attended. Only 18% of our offices have a steward or steward coverage. That includes area and ADRs and DRs. 18% of our country.
Just local. 18% have a local steward. ADRs, DRs, and area stewards cover everything else. 100%.
Yes, you're correct.
But you have to think they are literally covering 82% of the offices in this country.
Exactly.
And there aren't enough of them.
Nope.
In fact, Michigan here, we just got approved for 2 part-time ADRs and a couple more area stewards. And that's still not enough to cover Michigan.
Yeah. It's ludicrous.
This is the crux
James,
of the problem.
James, let me stop you there. And we have offices like my SDNC, which has an area steward in there. And they're still pounding the living hell out of the craft.
Mm-hmm.
So we need to recruit better, we need to train better, and we need to enforce the contract. And that includes how you treat people. Because I'm telling you right,
people correctly.
What what is the cost of having a dissatisfied employee or having someone like myself said, okay, I've had enough. I'm going to either jeopardize my retirement or my career if I follow this course of action. Just up and leave the company. Now you got to train a news person. Now you have another empty route. We have 2 routes going up for bid on the 28th. That'll leave the office of 18 rural carriers with 2 subs, and only one of them qualifies to be a PTF. And then you're going to create 2 new routes with the cuts on the 8.2 section and an aux route with the 8.0 section. Where are you getting these 3 new imaginary people, as well as the vehicles that they don't have right now? That report from South Carolina where they had 136 charging stations put into their SDNC. 40 of them were inoperative, and another 57 weren't charging correctly, which was funny because they only had 3 new vehicles. I don't know. Maybe it's me. I just, maybe I'm just the old angry white guy. But the fact of the matter is that management doesn't care. The national board apparently doesn't care.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, I've had a DR hand off, EEO charges against the SDC district manager, and they've gone nowhere in 2 years. I'm just, if I wasn't so involved, okay, in regards to my friends at the office, the people on this podcast, the craft itself, I would be disappointed. I would be disillusioned, and I would be swayed to not to participate. Not to the point where if you don't put a stamp on the return envelope, I'm not sending it. That was the most hideous suggestion I've heard yet. I stole that off of one of my co-hosts, so I'm not going to tell which one of you all it is, Josh. But the fact of the matter is that, can you blame people for the attitude they have right now?
You can and you cannot.
Yeah.
Some of us that see the bigger picture, I guess I can blame people because I'm the kind of person that if you tell me, well, if things are ever going to change, well, by God, I'm going to do whatever I can to change it. And some people are just like, okay, I guess I'll just sit here. They give up.
The biggest problem in this whole system is the fact that every single one of these carriers that did not send in a vote had a reason why. Whether it was they didn't get the ballot in time because of places like Palmetto and Indianapolis not getting mail through them easily, or whether it was the fact that they had no clue this was going on. They didn't get their tentative agreement booklet, nor were they aware of the website having the Zoom video, not meeting or video conference, but just video. And they didn't know about the local meetings because they hadn't gotten their national magazine telling them that they had the local meeting. And they don't have the app on their phone because they're too old to have that technology. Or they don't know that the NRLCA has an app because they never met their union steward, never had any conversation with those people. As someone just said in our chat, 75% of our craft are left to their own devices to be informed. I've said this before. I talked to a carrier who had 20 years in at the Postal Service, never even knew who their union steward was, who their designated union representative was. That is not a failure on the carrier. That is a failure on our representatives. Our representatives should be going to these offices and meeting with these carriers and just at least saying, hey, my name's so-and-so. I'm your designated union representative. Here's my card. If you need anything, contact me. We should have people going to these offices and saying, hey, I'm here for you. I get paid by your dues. I work for you. Tell me what I can do to help you. The fact that our craft feels ignored by those who are supposed to represent them is sickening. Our craft should be stronger than it is. Our craft should be fighting harder than it is. We are smaller than the NALC, but we should be the biggest fighter out there. I'm going to take a Michigan reference here. Michigan State versus Michigan. Michigan State is the smaller school compared to U of M, according to statistics. The baby brother of Michigan to the U of M fan. But Michigan State has a tough basketball team, tough football team, has great scholastics because they fight for it. They go for every inch they can get. And our craft should be the same way. But we need to start with the fighters in this craft. The people who signed up to fight for our carriers. Because local stewards sign up to fight for this craft. And I've had some local stewards tell me they don't get help from above them. The apathy in this craft is because of how our union representatives treat them. Now, I'm not saying all of them. I am not saying specific ones. But if you feel it applies to you, take a deep dive into what you're doing. Because your first and last thought in that position should be, what am I doing to better this craft?
Can I expound upon that, James?
In 1 second.
Okay.
If I know your name and I have never met you in person, that's a problem. I should not have to know your name before I'm even elected into office. I should only know you once I'm elected into office or I have met you in person. But the fact that I know your name already speaks volumes of what you're doing or not doing for this craft. Now you can expand upon it, Josh.
If you are a union rep, local area, DR, ADR, national board member, you are elected to serve in that position. Your thought at the beginning of the day, throughout your day, and at the end of the day is, what am I doing, and what have I done to serve this craft? Nobody should be in this for themselves. This, as I like to borrow from my middle and high school, should be something of a servant's heart position. Yes, you get paid if you're on the national board. Yes, you get your housing paid for if you're on the national board. But at the end of the day, you were elected to serve the craft. I'm off my soapbox.
No, you're not.
Damn.
Bill, you want to add to that?
Well, let's see. When our founding fathers started this country, they were considered legislator gentlemen. Most of them were farmers, okay? And they didn't perceive politics, per se, to be a lifelong career, which it has turned into. We brought this up at the state convention in regards to having term limits. The one resolution that was put forth was was shot down automatically because it was poorly worded and didn't really give a number for term limits. And when I turned around to amend the language in regards to a 10-year limit, well, it takes that long to work their way up the ladder. And I said, we have a president who's at the top of the ladder. He's worked his way up there since 2008. And Ronnie's worked his way up the ladder, and Jeanetta's worked her way up the ladder. And what has that gotten us, ladies and gentlemen? It got us substantial wage increases, according to Don Matson. We were going to eliminate Table 2, according to Don Matson. Neither happened. And then you turn around and people say, well, we got 2 weeks off of every step. Wow, you got barely half, or a little over half a year taken off of 15 steps. Meanwhile, the city carriers took 3 steps right off the front end. And they have 40-week steps, if I read that correctly. So where did you gain? Where's all the money coming? I mean, I know you're excited about the Diet Colas. I know you're excited about getting the extra $1. But where's the substantial wage increases that Don talked about? And then to come out and issue a almost word for word statement that this was fair and equitable in the best interest of the post office. If you are treating the employees the way they treat us, if you are paying us on the scale of working at Walmart while maintaining POVs on 100-mile routes, and you think that's fair and equitable, you think that's a substantial wage increase, ladies and gentlemen, you got to be full of shit. And I just sit there and just go, how did we get less than 15,000 votes to return on this contract agreement? And the word still that comes up is apathy. And and I know everybody has an office where people don't get involved. They want to do their route and they want to go home. They don't care about this. They don't care about that. Well, nobody cared about Rex while I was preaching it for 2 years before its initiation. Now, the 3 carriers in my office that dropped substantially because they didn't care, they cared after that, didn't they? But even to this day, people are more concerned with their individual lives. They don't understand the meaning of a union. It's not just standing up for yourself. It's standing up for the entire craft. What you fight for today may not benefit you yourself directly, but down the road, it's going to protect somebody in your office. And in some other office out in Kansas or Minnesota or Portland, Oregon, something that happens there is going to directly affect your situation in your office because somebody stood up to management. And I hate saying this, but it's up to us to look out for each other because the national board's not doing it. And I don't see that they will in anywhere in the near future. Back to you, James.
I swear they listen to this podcast because I've heard them use phraseology and ways of speaking that we do on this podcast. But it's almost as if 3/4 of what we say on here doesn't sink in and help them realize we're trying to help them too. We're trying to open their eyes to what the craft is seeing on the ground here, on top of educating our fellow brothers and sisters. But the fact that they think this podcast is a bane of society, of the craft, because our president has said social media is the bane of society, but also that they are trying to tempt each and every one of us away from this by holding a carrot in front of our face tells us that we're doing something right because we're making it harder for them to just float through with what they're doing. But the numbers, to get back to our initial topic, the numbers, the fact that 6,000 less people voted than the last 3 tentative agreements per the magazines on the website, or the news on the website. I went through the news and actually checked up our previous tentative agreements, and they were all right around between 19 and 21,000 people voting. That fault is 100% square on the shoulders of the man at the top. He is one of the few variables in this situation that is still there. He did not have any influence or control the previous 3 tentative agreements, only this one. 6,000 people less voting says a lot about what's going on. Says a lot about how this craft feels. Says a lot about where this craft is headed. It's time to change that.
Point of
Time
privilege,
to get
James.
always.
We have a yellow card in microphone 2.
Yes, Josh Stowe, delegate North Carolina. I would like to bring the party's attention to the number of ballots sent out in 2019, 97,789, 2022, 92,400, and this time 91,369.
Yep.
I yield the balance of my time.
The numbers are going down, a number of craft employees. But let me pull this up for you, because you guys know I did recalculate the negatives. There were 1,051 less ballots sent out in the 2025 election than the 2022 election. Of that, 3,586 of those were relief carriers, which includes RCAs, RCRs, etc. Excludes PTFs and ARCs. However, every other category had more carriers in it. So the big ones, which are important to Don Maston, regular carriers, there were 647 more regular carrier ballots sent out. And though they pay regular carrier dues, but only are guaranteed throughout the week, 1,559 PTF. And then 329 more ARC. And that's because of the proliferation more of Amazon around the country. That is a big change. But you had 4,383 less regular carriers voting, 2,643 less RCAs voting, but you did have 106 more PTF and 1 extra ARC vote this year versus 2022. The biggest
Go ahead.
Go ahead.
May delegate, Pennsylvania, microphone 4. Point of
Go
personal
ahead.
privilege, please.
Recognizes May.
Now, you all know I've run against Don Madsen several times.
Mm-hmm.
And because of the old boy system, people, don't like my personality. I'm not worried about that. I sleep well at night. Let me make it known for the record that personally, I do not like Don Madsen as a person. I know that's a surprise, okay? But as the president of our union, I would put that dislike aside. If he said, Bill, I want you to come and join a commission to find out what's going on with the craft. If he actually expressed an interest in why these numbers are populating every time we're voting on something. If he wanted to know why people are bailing on the union and why people are getting treated like shit, I'd work my ass off day and night to support the office of the president of the NRLCA, even though I don't like the individual. It would not be in my interest not to do that because of the fact that I would be serving the office of the president and I would be serving the craft. And I'd put my whole heart into it. But the fact of the
Wistic
matter
spot.
is, well, what I'm saying, this is, people say they're disconnected. They don't know. Well, to know, you have to look. You have to ask those questions. You can't sit there and go along and talking to everybody who's in the NSS or on the executive committee board or your state presidents or anything, or God forbid the people you send as legislative attendees, because of the fact they're getting the free trip and they're not doing their routes either. But the fact of the matter is that all of that is mute if the craft is dying, and this craft is dying, and we're not letting it go down without a fight. I hope they listen to that on the podcast.
Mm-hmm. And I've been looking over all these numbers for the past week. And the biggest thing that I can talk about here for 2025 are the lack of support in many areas, including the U.S. Virgin Islands, where we have 3 carriers who have not voted in any of these past ratifications. Puerto Rico only had 7 people out of 69 vote. That's not a lot, but that's still low numbers. Any of these states that had less than 20% participation, we need to get boots on the ground talking to these carriers. Because these carriers either aren't aware of all these pieces they have to do, or, like some, don't actually care. But if they don't care, that's okay. That's on them. But we have to find out why our craft, who are putting money into this union, are not participating. Now, I talked about at my state convention putting in a half-page questionnaire once a year for people to talk about why they aren't participating, basically. What can we do to get you to participate? And it would just be a 2-week, 3-week, 4-week, whatever time frame they want to put on it for them to mail it back or fill it out online. Save postage, fill it out online. And we could find out at least 20-25% of the people could respond to that and tell us why they aren't participating. We can expand on that. But we have to do something. Because a lack of participation kills unions. That's why we have locals merging together. That's why we have state associations struggling to have a quorum. Something has to change, or we're going to lose everything we have.
If we don't stand for something, eventually there will be nothing left to stand for.
It comes to a point where, like James said, where a guy had been 20 plus years and didn't know who his local representative was. The guy in Phoenixville in our SDNC, 30 years in, and didn't realize that they hadn't measured the walking distances inside an SDNC and out to the parking lot for the 3 years they've been there. It's that kind of abject resolve that nothing's going to get better and nothing's going to change. Well, as somebody said, boots on the ground. If you can't put a face, with the voice, if you can't put a character, a person in front of you for these situations that are going on in every offices all across the country, you can't get your vehicle fixed like there in Michigan, that somebody said on free show. If you don't have somebody that actually is in front of you and connecting with you, there is no connection there, and that's where the apathy comes in. Somebody that pulls over on the side of the road to assist you because you got a flat tire, you don't know them from Jack, but they went out of their way to assist you, whether you needed help changing the tire, you position your vehicle to protect them from getting hit, giving them water or whatever. It doesn't matter. If you put a face in front of people, there's that connection, that people care, that people are concerned about your welfare. And they don't. They don't care. Don is going to run for president for one more year. Okay? And if he beats James out, it'll be his last year. And then John Adams will step up and run for president next year, because he'll have 2 years under his belt as the director of labor relations. And he's a worthy candidate. But we're still going up the ladder, even though John Adams himself hasn't been on that ladder as long as the rest of them have. They've already made a career out of it. They've spent 20 years on that ladder, and probably more years than that, going through their state association. But the fact of the matter is, until you get somebody like the director of steward operations going into a plant and raising cane, or you have a DR filing EEOs against district managers and booms for their failed policies and constant and continual violation of the contract, where you turn around and you have offices that are now looking at starting at 9:30 in the morning because their Amazon trucks aren't getting there on time in the middle of this heat, which is the second part of our topic tonight.
A perfect segue.
There's something, yeah, there's something wrong. We have a situation in my SDC, and yes, it's mine, even though I'm retired, it's still mine, that a highway contractor is going to be losing one of their 3 routes. The argument is that they're going to give it to the city carriers. Now, mind you, the highway contractors have always been in the rural craft area. Mind you that the rural craft delivers their parcels every Sunday for the past 8 years. But now you're going to turn around and hand this route off to the city route. Now, total explanation, they have to do a cost optimization program, a research in regards to what's more efficient. If they do that, then it'll most likely go to the rural craft. Now, here's where I will say, I don't want that route. And people go, why not? It'll help the rural craft. You understand, these highway contractors are hired at the lowest bid. So there's not a lot of money, even though they do operate on a semi-evaluated system like we do. This particular route has apartment buildings with outside stairwells. And you know where your credit stops as far as your distance on apartment buildings, whether 1, 2, or 3 floors. I don't know who wants to do that in this heat, and I don't know anybody wants to do it in winter weather either. To me, it's one of those lose-lose situations because of the fact that somebody might lose their life or they might lose the carrier saying, F this, I'm not doing this anymore. But the fact of the matter is that, we need a DR in on that one. The area steward is hapless in regards to the handling the situation. And don't even get me started on the DRs and the ADRs because, boy, at our convention, there was enough shit going on that I walked to the bar. Had to. I couldn't take their talk anymore sober. It was that bad. And I want to cast aspersions, and I'm not going to name names, but I'll tell you what, we need to give the national sewage system back to the states. And with that segue, let's talk about the rest of the other heat, James.
Yes, it's already gotten really hot on this episode as it is. But we've got a major heat wave coming across the nation already. And I just wanted to really talk about heat related illness. And I understand management is supposed to give us HIP training. Management's gotten rid of doing the online portion with carriers, gotten rid of the video that we have to watch, gone to just here's a paper and a stand up talk on it. That's not adequate. My office is having trouble getting water shipped into it. And I've told the hostmaster, sounds like you're making a trip to Costco. And we've got to have water available for carriers. We've got to have cooling stops. We've got to have things with us to hydrate us. And hydration starts before you start working. It starts the night before. And I understand some people are like, oh, I'm on my route and I don't have a place to go to the bathroom. In this heat, you're not going to need the bathroom. You're going to be sweating it out. No matter what kind of vehicle you're in. Even your POV routes, it's going to come to a point where the AC of your vehicle is not going to be strong enough to counteract the heat outside, especially with your window down. You need to find ways to take care of yourself out there because we've had carriers who have died. Mr. Eugene Gates on the city side. We've had a supervisor who died doing a ride along in the jump seat of a truck. And on top of that, we had a carrier who had a medical emergency, called 911, told their supervisor through RIMS messaging that they were sick, and ended up calling an ambulance, going to the hospital. After getting out of the hospital, went back to the office, and the supervisor didn't even know they were gone. But then that carrier got placed on emergency placement. Management, some management, I'm going to rephrase, because there are good managers out there, few and far between, but they're out there, will not care whether you are living or died. They won't care if you're passed out in a customer's yard. They won't care if you needed an ambulance to take you to the hospital because you had a medical emergency. All they care about is whether their boss above them is pleased or not. You need to take care of yourself out there. Take care of your fellow brothers and sisters. Make sure your carriers have water, ice, ways to keep themselves cool. My area specifically, I am under an excessive heat warning for heat indices of 105 degrees. Now, for somebody in Texas, they're like, oh, that's just a Saturday. But in Michigan, that's extreme for us. I'm expecting power outages. I'm expecting people to be ending up in the hospital. I'm expecting our emergency services to be overloaded with that. You guys have to take care of yourselves too. And look out for your city brothers and sisters as well. Because they're in this with us, and management cares less about them than they do us, which says a lot. Your guys' thoughts.
I always enjoyed coming back to the office in the summer months, and I packed very small snacks, but put 8 bottles of frozen water in my lunch bag, And I always enjoyed one on my way back coming down Price Street in Westchester and running into a city carrier, and they're just drenched. And I say, hey, brother, you need a bottle of water? Only if it's cold. And I'll tell you what, you ought to see their face light up when you hand them an ice cold bottle of water. I mean, they're out there dying too, doing those parking loops. And like you said, James, I mean, down in Texas, 105. Oh, that's a nice morning. But in the same respect, they also don't have to put up with 30 below up in Michigan either. So different end of the spectrum, but the same situation. It's amazing what you get used to. But for the most part, even people in Texas are used to it. You have to prepare, and you have to prepare the night before. You got to get that fluid into your system and to protect yourself. And not long, big gulps of water and everything. Sips. Just make sure you do sips and keep doing sips all damn day long.
And not ice cold water. You don't want it
Nope.
freezing. That can put your system
Into
in
shock
shock.
too. Yep.
And also make sure you are getting your electrolytes, aka liquid IV, the little tear open packets that you put in your bottle of water. Make sure you're getting those, because when you sweat, you're not only losing water, you're losing electrolytes, and you need to replenish them.
Hold on. My supervisor told me if I need electrolytes, I'd just lick the battery in the truck.
Delegate Stowe reserves opinion for later time.
Yeah, just put your tongue on both them terminals. You'll be fine.
Yeah. And remember, if you start feeling dizzy, you start feeling nauseous, you start feeling like you're going to vomit, or you're going to pass out, that's a medical emergency.
It's 911 there.
That is 911. Send a REMS message. I know we say don't text your boss, but send them a text message from your phone. I'm going to the hospital. The truck's going to be here. Ambulance is here. But call 911 first. You can pass out while talking to the supervisor. You can't pass out while calling 911.
They'll find you.
Doing that, they'll find you, but it'll take them longer. But calling 911 first, get the help on the way to you before you call your supervisor, is the best thing you can do for yourself. Take breaks. Take them in the shade. Take them in air conditioning. As
But
often
James,
as you
aren't we
need.
supposed to use only approved rest breaks? As
We're
per
not
the
city
scan?
carriers.
Yes.
We're not city carriers.
Figured I'd throw that
And
in there.
on top of that, above 80 degrees per hip training is a heat day for the Postal Service. So that means that extra rest breaks are authorized above 80 degrees Fahrenheit per their own training that they give us. And I'm going to tell you, at 105 degrees, I'm going to be taking myself a few heat breaks.
Yes.
Mm-hmm.
So I'm going to probably get.
Don't be shy, James. People listening, if you're feeling like that, don't be shy about asking the customer if you can come inside for a couple minutes. If you've got that kind of relationship, get your body core temperature down.
If you are very close with your customers and you trust them, yes.
Well, and also, if you have a route that's like mine, I know where my rest breaks are. I know where I can pull over, and it's always shady, and I can cool off. Guys, take the time to be observant on your route. I mean, it may be the colloquialism of the big oak tree in the church parking lot. If it's got shade, that's your rest spot. Find yourself a place to rest.
And get out of the truck, because that damn truck is like a mini bake oven. Jesus. You can step out of your truck into a 97, 98 day, degree day, and it's still 15 to 20 degrees better outside than in your truck.
I know every place on my route where I can park the truck out of the way to do a reload as needed in the shade.
Amen, brother.
And in these temperatures, I set my truck up to reload out the back door. Gets me out of the truck, gets me to open up all the doors on the truck to get some of that excess heat out of the truck while I'm reloading my mail onto the tray on the side because I drive an LLV.
And I do the same thing in
Finding
my Metro.
finding a way to get yourself out of that truck, even for 5-10 minutes while you're taking your time reloading, because you don't want to overexert yourself, is how you do it. But you are working or taking a heat related break, which is not one that should be a lunch break.
No.
Heat related breaks, because we have scanner messages that take breaks as needed in the heat, that is an instruction to take breaks that are
As
not
needed.
lunch breaks.
They're as needed.
They are not lunches. You're not taking the time to have a lunch. You're taking the time to keep yourself from dying.
Amen to
But
that.
that's what I have, guys, for today. What do you
I
guys got?
I mean,
I've got oh, go ahead, Bill.
I think we've covered it, succinctly. The fact of it is, one of the things that most people ignore with the heat is when you start having confused thoughts. Am I sweating? Am I not sweating? That is a very strong indication that you need to call 111. If you become disoriented in any sense in the heat, that's the time to stop, get out of the truck, and call 911. I've had a couple carriers do that. One carrier turned around, just drove off the road, just felt like he was getting dizzy, but felt he was okay to finish the route. The next thing you know, he was off the road in the ditch. Disorientation is one of those symptoms that you cannot ignore.
No.
It's like I say, make sure you make the most important delivery of the day, get home to your loved ones. There you go. If you don't take care of yourself out on the route, nobody will. And I don't want to hear, about one more carrier death, rural or city side.
No.
And anything else, Josh?
Echoing what Bill said, it's hot. Make sure you're acclimating to the heat if you're not used to this kind of weather. Make sure you're taking your breaks. Make sure that you're advising other people to take their breaks. And as we all say, you are the most important delivery of the day. Get to work, do your job, and come home the same way you left. Although you may have lost a couple of pounds of water weight, but that notwithstanding.
And one more thing, gentlemen, wear the appropriate attire.
Yes.
Wear loose, light clothing. Don't be putting 80 pounds of stuff in your cargo pants. If you're allowed to wear sleeveless t-shirts, as I have for the last 20 some years, do so. If the women can get away with the spaghetti straps, which is a matter of contention based on local offices' parameters of appropriate wear, do so. Reduce the amount of clothing that you have on and make sure they're appropriate for summer heat.
I agree with everything you guys have said, and also make sure that the clothing you're wearing is appropriate in nature to symbolize your pride as being a rural carrier professional. I'm just going to say that we do not have a specific dress code other than local management may decide what can and cannot be appropriate, but there's also grievable remedies in some of those instances as well. But as they say,
Don't
In the wintertime, you could put on as many layers as needed, but in the summer, you can only take off so many before it becomes illegal.
I would like to add one thing, if I may.
Go ahead. Well, give us your final
For,
thoughts then.
for those that are driving POVs, if you haven't already, make sure that that vehicle is properly maintained. Make sure that you have the right level of antifreeze. Make sure you're keeping up on the maintenance because it's hot and you're not moving that fast in some cases. And that vehicle's going to heat up really quick. And if there's a weak water pump or if there's old coolant that's not as effective, you're going to learn about it pretty quick. And talk about a way to ruin your day.
Bill, your final thoughts?
Well, continue along those lines of POVs. When I had a POV route, I always had my cars fitted with extra transmission and radiator coolers, just for certain situations. Transmission per se, mostly for the winter time, but the extra radiator cooler made a big difference in not blowing my system during the hot days. So that's a good point to bring up. Final thoughts is, folks, we've got to do something to get people involved. We have to do something to make the national board more accountable in regards to seeing our plight. It's amazing. Oh, six of our resolutions were presented for consideration in the national contract. 6 out of over 200. Well, what happens to those 200? Well, those 200 get piled on to the next year's resolutions and the years after resolutions. So now you're going to have 600 resolutions for consideration for the next contract. If the individual puts the effort into making the resolution, if the resolutions committee make the effort into recommending resolutions and the states pass them and submit them to the national board, there should be more consideration than 6 out of over 200. And again, that's just the 200 presented. If what the line of reasoning is that the previous year's resolutions that didn't get presented are compiled on, there could have been 400 resolutions that they could have considered, but we only chose 6. That speaks volumes in regards to what the national board considers important for the craft. Not that the craft put the effort in putting these resolutions forward, having the language amended to fit the programs and everything else, having them passed by the states, having them submitted to the national board, having them approved at the national board for consideration. You do all that work and they take 6 to the table. I don't think that truly represents fair representation of our craft by our national board. What do you think? I mean, is that even something to be considered, that they have our best interest at heart? I don't believe so. Ladies and gentlemen, I'm retired, but I'm still involved, and I've got things to do in regards to getting our local up on Zoom meetings, because we have another local who'll be joining us again. Locals are combining because they can't get enough participation, and we're going to do Zoom meetings to get people involved from their homes, so they don't have to travel to a meeting, sit through it for 2.5 hours, and travel back home at the end of their work days. I will not give up on this craft. I didn't when I was there. I won't now. I turned down the opportunities to be on the state board because I believe I have a larger voice here. I want to believe that we can turn this around, but we all have to make a greater effort to do so. I mean, if the national board won't listen to us, then we have to listen to each other. And we have to find ways to bring everybody back into the flock. I'm not sure on how all the ways that people would consider. People have tried gift cards to go to local meetings. We provide meals. and still people don't participate. So hopefully with the Zoom meetings that we'll be able to do, we'll get some more interaction from our craft employees in our local. I don't know, but I'm grasping at straws. But as long as I have breath and strength in me, I will grasp at those straws. Because we can do better. We have to do better. Like I said, I do not like Don Madsen as an individual. But if appointed, I would serve the office of the president to make this craft have an actual voice at the national level. Because you're worth it to me. You got to realize I've been in this craft for over 26 years. So you guys are like family to me. I've got a customer to go see on Wednesday just because I keep in touch with some of my customers. I got to bring my grandson over because she just loves seeing the little guy. I'm totally invested. I'll be down in Orlando because I'm invested. You need to be just as invested, and you need to help get other people invested. Start small at the local level, work their way up. My guy went to the first state convention. Now he's invested. He was thrilled by seeing the interactions, and he watched the politicking and everything else. But he thought that was enlightening to see the due process of a state convention. So if you have any ideas, you send them to me. Send them to people in your offices, in your state, wherever, whatever. But keep fighting the fight because we have to save this craft in spite of the circumstances that we find ourselves in. God bless you all coming this week with the heat and everything. Be safe. When in doubt, check out. Call 911. Don't put yourself at risk. You are the most important delivery of the day. And I want you all to get home to your families every day. They love you. They need you. The post office couldn't give a rat's ass. God bless you all. James?
Thank you, guys. Yes, it is important that we take care of our fellow brothers. It's important that we take care of our city brothers and sisters. We need to look out for our elderly customers during these hot times, too. They're just as important as well. But as Bill says, you are the most important delivery of the day. We care about you here on this podcast. We will always care about you here on this podcast. Because as I say, we're all in this together. Everybody have a good night, have a good week, and we'll see you next time.
And as I say, good night and good luck.
Clear.